Oh look, a wild dual blade appeared. You call that spin to win? You are like little baby. Watch this. Why hello there everyone, and welcome back to the IroncladLion channel. With the Ultimate Pike Guide completed, we'll now be working on our Season 8 unit guides, starting with the Cudgel Monks. In this video, we'll be covering the Cudgel Monk attributes, Veterancy Lines, Doctrines, abilities, training yard demonstrations, and some live examples in the field. But first, a little history. From my extremely brief and certainly not comprehensive research on the background of this unit, there seem to be two different interpretations of the Cudgel Monk. The first is the monks of the Shaolin Temple that use the cudgel staff as shown, which is a weapon disguised to look like a religious piece, but was actually used for self-defense. The design of the weapon was to batter an opponent from a distance without causing significant harm, as though being used as a deterrent weapon. The second interpretation of the Cudgel Monk uses the Shaolin Staff, which is a simple but solid wood staff. This staff was designed to be used in combination with Kung Fu techniques. Now in Conqueror's Blade, since the unit is called Cudgel Monks, I thought we'd be getting the actual Cudgel Staff, but instead it looks like we're getting the second interpretation and getting Shaolin Monks instead, with a more Kung Fu appearance and fighting style. Anyways, just wanted to make a quick comment on that topic, as I feel the name of the Cudgel Monks is a bit misleading, as they are not actually wielding cudgels, which falls into the club type category, rather than a staff. Speaking of staves, the first unit trait for the Cudgel Monks is Six-Way Staff, which describes how if the monks hit with Six-Way Staff, they will heal for 500 health. Next is Swamp, which gives the monks increased damage against cavalry, and reduces their movement speed. Third is Suppression of Evil, which has a number of parts to it. Each attack by the monks increases their movement speed by 6%, stacking up to 5 times for a total 30% movement speed buff. They also hit enemies' movement speed for 6%, and reduce their defense by 10%. So in total, at 6 stacks, the monks move 30% faster, while hit enemies move 30% slower, and have their defenses reduced by 50%. The monks also have their leadership costs reduced by 15 during Season 8. Their first ability is Six-Way Staff, which is a charge that will block arrows and then hits with a strong block breaking effect after the initial jump. If this powerful attack hits an enemy, the monks will recover some health. Windmill Strike is an ongoing attack ability that lasts for 10 seconds, and can heal the monks while hitting enemies. Now looking at these unit traits, do these seem bizarre to you at all? They certainly do to me, but let's go ahead and take a look at the monk's Veterancy Lines. The monk top Veterancy Line consists of several tiers of defensive boosts, a range damage reduction which is shared between the lines, and 2 boosts to the heal from Six-Way Staff. The bottom line, which I have gone with, gives cooldown reductions, blunt damage bonuses, the shared range damage reduction, but the final 2 levels are what caught my eye when originally picking which line to go with. Move as 1 increases movement by 10% total, changing the monk's speed from 5.5 to 6.1. This boost makes the Cudgel Monks the new fastest infantry unit in the game, beating out Sons of Fenrir at 6.0. At least in default movement speed. The Wolf Boys can still move faster when using Predator, as shown in my amazing Sons of Fenrir guide. The last tier is Heavies, which lets the monks hit more than 1 enemy at a time with their normal attacks. The reason I went with the bottom line is it lets the monks actually act as a shock troop, with the faster movement speed, increased damage, hitting multiple enemies, and reduced cooldowns. They can actually bonk pretty hard. You know why I didn't go with the top line? 3 tiers of that tree are spent raising each of the monks' defenses by somewhere between 14 to 17 points, for a whopping total of, we'll be generous and say 50 points. A single doctrine can provide that much defense for all 3 attributes. I just don't see raising your defenses from about 280 to 300 a good use of a Veterancy Line. While the boosted heals are nice, this unit is fragile, and maybe has the ability to tank serfs. Woodcutters might be pushing it. Monk Doctrines? Never heard of them. You can acquire the Monastic Doctrine 1 by completing the unit challenges, while the Monastic Doctrine 2 can be done by completing Season 8 story missions. If you are watching this past Season 8, don't worry, these doctrines aren't anything crucial. In fact, pretty much none of these are. That being said, I'd recommend throwing your blunt damage and penetration doctrines on them, as you probably have extras of those. After that, you can give them a health doctrine. If you have space for defense, I'd recommend slashing defense, as that will let the monks win more melee fights. But really, since the monks monks don't get any designated unit doctrines like polearm or anything, there's not a whole lot you can really do with them. I've got a temporary sprint doctrine which lets them go plaid, but that's just for the memes. Let's hit that training yard and bonk some fools. Monks are pretty simple when it comes to their abilities, and should use Six-Way Staff as their gap closer and charge. This is a somewhat unique charge because it's broken into 4 parts. The charge, which blocks arrows, the jump kick, the spin, and the smack. Since there are so many parts to this charge, you actually want to let the whole thing play out to get the most damage. After the final smack, that's when you can activate Windmill, and watch the lawnmower go. While Six-Way Staff has a whole plot line to its animation, Windmill Strike lasts for 10 seconds, so each monk will mow the lawn as they see fit. I'll say it once more because it's probably the most important part of using the monks. Make sure you let the monks finish the entire Six-Way Staff animation before activating Windmill Strike. Otherwise, you'll cut the animation short, which takes away much of their potential damage. Since the monks are fast, they can heal up at a supply point and get back to the front line quicker than most units. When it comes to the monk formations, whatever makes your staff rigid. I usually have my monks in the second F2 arc formation for charging, but any of the 3 formations will work just fine. The third formation can be useful when moving in tight spaces, so use whichever one depending on the terrain. The monks are not very good at prolonged combat as they are rather squishy troops. Because of this, we want to use them as shock troops. Use your abilities, deal damage, and get them back to a supply point to heal up. That's about everything I can cover in the training yard, so let's see those battlefield examples. The Cudgel monks have the Swamp trait, which lets them do extra damage to cavalry and slow them down. Of course, they don't want to get trampled by the cav, but with their quick movement speed, they can sidestep a charge quite effectively. You can then use Six-Way Staff or Windmill to beat the cav up once they are vulnerable. This isn't of course the main use of the monks, but it's another way they can help the team. Why do they even have the Swamp trait at all? I don't know, you tell me. So given the suppression of evil trait, how should the monks be used ideally? We've covered that they should be used as shock tropes, but they should also be used in combination with allies. Because they reduce enemies' defenses, the monks can soften up higher armor enemies to make them much easier to kill. Here on Harbor City, we'll combine our monks with friendly cavalry and shock units to launch a swift and effective strike on the enemy back line. I order Six-Way Staff into the enemy formations and let the monks get to work. Notice how I wait until a good amount of time has passed before activating Windmill. This way, the monks are power bonking for the greatest duration possible. With the enemy units out of the way, we can now focus on the enemy heroes. The great thing about suppression of evil is that it affects units and heroes alike, so we can reduce their movement speed and defenses. This lets us beat down long and short sword heroes in a fraction of the time. On Grassland Assault, I want to demonstrate how flanking doesn't have to be a solo experience. Sometimes all it takes is a quick 5-second movement of your unit to outplay your opponent. With Six-Way Staff, I help beat down the enemy Iron Reapers, but since I don't want my monks to run into the enemy pikes, I call them back to me with the F3 formation. Utilizing their fast movement speed, we'll take the monks around the pike wall. The enemy musket hero tries to stop this, but the monks are already in position. I start up the lawnmower and dismantle the enemy formation. The enemy spear hero makes the mistake of getting bonked, and now their defenses are lowered and movement speed crippled. With only a single monk lost, we'll send them back to supply. To get the most out of the monks, you should be using their 2 abilities to deal damage and then maneuvering them during their cooldowns. Here on Valley Fortress, we'll demonstrate that concept. We'll use Six-Way Staff to get the monks up the stairs. When we spot the enemy spear hero trying to flee, we'll swiftly bring the monks over to us and activate the lawnmower to chew up the enemy hero. With the spear hero reduced to yard waste, we'll cut through the tents and get onto point. Now pay attention. I was about to send my monks in, but instead decided to wait until Six-Way Staff was off cooldown. I think this was the right call, as once I sent them into the fight, they were able to heal and deal significantly more damage. Even though I was fighting the short sword on point, I still made sure to activate Windmill once available, which kept our monks spinning. Notice that throughout this whole clip, I didn't lose a single monk. Even if the monks are not the units getting kills, they're quite helpful for their debuffs they can apply to enemies. In a bigger brawl type scenario, the monk abilities can help weaken enemy units and break the block of shield units. If you have friendly units in the area, this will let them easily wipe away the enemy formations. The bonus from Suppression of Evil also gives the monks a 30% speed boost. I think this is most effective if you need to disengage from enemy unit, as it lets the monks rapidly reposition or head back to a supply point. So what are the monk weaknesses? Well, I think it's cool they can bonk enemies to apply debuffs. They're quite terrible in a 1v1 scenario, and are best when combined with allied units. Being unable to fight effectively as a standalone unit, however, greatly limits their potential on the battlefield. If their abilities are on cooldown, their default attack is pretty bad. Therefore, you should avoid combat without your abilities, and try to keep them at max health. So looking at the monk unit as a whole, I find them to be incredibly mediocre, and in desperate need of a buff, to get them in line with other blue units. By comparison, the Sons of Fenrir from Season 7 can do everything the monks can do, but better. This is also given the fact that this unit's leadership is reduced by 15 in Season 8, and yet nobody is using them even now. I'm all for support style units like the strong, independent shield maidens, but if a unit has to be played perfectly just to be average, nobody is going to use them. I love the idea of smiting my foes down with ruthless pacifism, but I'm afraid these discount airbenders aren't going to cut it. But here's hoping the devs hear my feedback and get this unit into fighting shape, hopefully accompanied by a montage with "Let's get down to business," or something like that. You get the idea. If you enjoyed this guide and learned more about the Cudgel monks,
accept your fate
and subscribe to the channel. Before I have to beat you to death with pacifism, we're on our way to 1,000 subscribers, and I'd love for you to be there for when we're YouTube famous. Drop your feedback in the comments down below. I'm IroncladLion, and I'll see you in the next video. Cudgel monkey.